At 3:12 a.m., the sound that woke me up wasn't thunder or a car alarm or one of those neighborhood coyotes that scream like they're auditioning for a horror movie. It was metal scraping concrete, slow and steady, like somebody dragging a secret across my driveway. I opened my eyes, and for half a second my brain tried to pretend it was nothing. Then a hard white beam slid across my bedroom wall, and my stomach dropped, because I knew that light, I knew that rhythm, I knew exactly what it meant. A tow company. On my property. In the dark. Again. I rolled to the window, pulled the curtain back just enough to see, and there he was. A guy in a hoodie under an orange rotating beacon, staring at my van like it was a vending machine that owed him money. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't nervous. He looked comfortable, like he'd done this 1,000 times and never once been held accountable. And right then I realized this wasn't about parking. This was about power, and somebody in my neighborhood thought they could take mine whenever they felt like it. My name's Nate Harper. I'm 36. I live outside Raleigh, North Carolina, in a planned community called Cedar Hollow, the kind of place where the mailboxes match, the lawns are trimmed like they're competing for a trophy, and the HOA newsletter somehow manages to sound judgmental even when it's announcing a food drive. I've been in a wheelchair since I was 28, spinal cord injury, one dumb accident, one wet patch of asphalt, one impact that turned my body into a different country with a different set of rules. People always ask what the hardest part is. They expect you to say the pain, or the stares, or the pity looks. Honestly, the hardest part is how quickly strangers start treating your life like it's negotiable, like your access, your time, your dignity. Those are optional features. Like you should be grateful for anything you get and quiet about anything you don't. 3 months before the night I heard that scraping sound, I moved into Cedar Hollow because I wanted boring, predictable, flat sidewalks, no surprise hills, no charming buildings that secretly hate wheelchairs. I'd spent years in rentals where accessible meant we can carry you if we feel like it. I was tired of negotiating for basics. So when I found Cedar Hollow, I thought, okay, maybe this is finally where life gets a little less complicated. The first few weeks were fine. Neighbors waved. People smiled at my dog. I learned which house always left Christmas lights up until March. Normal stuff. Then the HOA emails started showing up like clockwork. Reminder, trash bins must be stored out of view by 6 p.m. Reminder, mulch must be natural brown, not red. Reminder, please do not leave vehicles in driveways overnight that do not match community standards. That last one made me squint at my phone. Because my van isn't a luxury. It isn't a toy. It isn't some oversized ego mobile. It's a modified minivan with hand controls, a side ramp, and a lowered floor. It's how I get groceries, how I get to work, how I get to the doctor. Without it, I don't just wait. I don't just figure something out. I'm stuck. But I told myself, they mean commercial trucks, work vans with ladders, RVs, the usual HOA nonsense. I'm not the problem. Then came Tuesday morning. I had a neurology appointment at 8:40 a.m., the kind you don't casually reschedule unless you enjoy waiting 4 months and arguing with insurance until your soul leaves your body. I had my routine down. Gloves, keys, transfer board, coffee locked into the cup holder like it was part of the car. I rolled down my ramp, hit the button on my key fob to open the van's side ramp. And my driveway was empty, just bare concrete, like somebody had erased my day before it even started. For a few seconds I honestly thought I was losing it. Like maybe I parked on the street, maybe my brother flew in from Ohio and borrowed it without telling me. Maybe I was still half asleep. Then my chest tightened and my brain landed on the only answer that made sense. I called 911. I told the dispatcher my wheelchair van was gone. I said it was in my driveway. I said it had a handicap placard. I gave my address. She paused, typed, then came back with that same sentence I've learned to hate with my whole body. Sir, it appears your vehicle was towed. Private property tow. Authorized by Cedar Hollow Community Association. I said, they towed it from my driveway. She said, that would be a civil matter. Civil matter. The adult version of not my problem. I forced my voice to stay level, asked where it was, got the tow company's name, and hung up with my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. The tow company was called Triangle Compliance Towing, which sounds like they're fighting crime, when really they're just dragging people's lives around for cash. I called and a guy answered like I'd interrupted his breakfast. I said, You towed a mobility-modified van from 118 Marigold Lane. That's my vehicle. He said, oh yeah, we got it. I said, it was in my driveway. He sighed like I was being dramatic. HOA called it oversized vehicle. Violation. I said, it's a mobility vehicle. It has a ramp. It has a placard. It's not optional. He paused, then said the stupidest thing I've heard in my entire adult life. You want it back? Come get it. For 100 cash. I said, I'm in a wheelchair. He said, Uber. I stared at my phone and said, so you want me to take an Uber? To pick up the vehicle, I need to drive. Because you took it. And he just went, yup. We close at 5. Click. I sat there on my porch with that metallic helplessness that tastes like pennies and shame. I checked the time. 7:29. I opened my rideshare app and searched for a wheelchair-accessible ride. 2 options, both far, both expensive. I booked one anyway because I didn't have a choice. I called my doctor's office and begged them to hold my appointment. The receptionist gave me that tone people use when they're trying to be kind, but also trying not to care. When the accessible ride finally arrived, the driver, Reggie, took one look at my face and said, somebody mess with you this morning? I said, yeah. My neighborhood. The tow yard looked exactly like every tow yard you've ever imagined. Chain link fence, gravel, a tiny office that looked like it had survived 3 hurricanes and a bad marriage. No ramp to the window, no designated parking. Just a step up, like the world daring me to complain. Reggie helped me get close enough to talk through the glass. The clerk looked me up and down and said, cash only. I said, I need an invoice, and I'm paying under protest. He smirked. Write whatever you want. So I did. Big block letters on the receipt. Paid under duress. Mobility vehicle. Tow disputed. I took pictures of everything. The receipt, the no-ramp entrance, the step, the gravel, the way my van was wedged between a rusted pickup and a dumpster like it was trash. On the side panel, there was a fresh scrape where they'd strapped it too tight. I took a picture of that too. I wasn't even fully angry anymore. I was focused, like something in me had clicked over from victim to problem. I made my appointment with 5 minutes to spare. My blood pressure was sky high. The nurse asked if I'd been stressed. I said, not yet. Give it a few hours. When I got home, there was a bright orange notice taped to my door. Violation, unapproved oversized vehicle in driveway overnight. Action required. Remove vehicle immediately. Repeat offense is subject to immobilization or towing. And at the bottom, in looping handwriting, a personal note. Nate, we really try to keep Cedar hollow-looking uniform. Please park the van in the guest lot near the clubhouse. It's not far. Thank you for understanding. Denise Caldwell, HOA president. It's not far. The guest lot was over half a mile away. Uphill. And the real joke. No continuous sidewalks. Just street asphalt and drainage ditches, like a DIY obstacle course for anyone who can't walk. I stared at that note and felt my anger cool into something sharper. Because now it wasn't an accident. It was a decision. So I started collecting facts. I used to work compliance for a construction outfit, which means I don't argue feelings, I argue documents. I pulled the HOA covenants and read every line about vehicles. Work trucks, RVs, commercial signage, overnight parking. My van didn't fit any of it. It wasn't a commercial vehicle. It was registered as private passenger. Then I found their favorite weapon. The aesthetics clause. The board reserves the right to determine what is unsightly, what affects community character, what must be corrected. A blank check. And Denise had put the worst part in writing, ordering me to park somewhere I couldn't actually access. That afternoon, I called an accessibility consultant named Mark Ellis. Quiet guy. Precise. The kind of person who measures first and judges later. I told him what happened. He didn't gasp. He didn't do sympathy. He just asked, where's the guest lot? I told him. He said, I'll be there in an hour. When Mark arrived, he brought a digital level, a tape measure, and a clipboard thick enough to stop a bullet. We went straight to the guest lot. It wasn't asphalt. It wasn't concrete. It was gravel. Loose, shifting gravel that grabs wheelchair tires like it's hungry. Mark looked at me and said, they told you to park here? I said, yep. He put the level down. Slopes off for accessible parking standards. He pointed at the clubhouse entrance. 3 steps. No ramp. No alternate entrance. I said, they rent the clubhouse out for events. It's on the community website. Mark's mouth twitched, not a smile, more like a warning. Then somebody's playing a dangerous game. We spent 2 hours documenting everything. Uneven sidewalks, missing curb cuts, mailbox cluster too high, pool gate latch positioned for standing height. It wasn't one problem. It was a pattern. Cedar Hollow looked pretty because it was designed for one kind of body. By the time we got back to my driveway, Mark had a list long enough to give the board heartburn. I drafted an email to the HOA, calm and clean, like I was writing a report, not a rant. I explained the tow, included photos of the placard and ramp, included my registration, included their note telling me to use an inaccessible lot, and I made a formal request for a reasonable accommodation. My mobility van is allowed in my driveway, without fines, without towing, without harassment. I requested a written response within 48 hours. Denise replied in 15 minutes. 2 sentences. Our rules apply to everyone. Please park in the guest lot to maintain community standards. That was the moment the story stopped being about misunderstanding. So I filed a complaint with the State Fair Housing Office. I attached Denise's handwritten note. I attached her email denial. I attached Mark's measurements. I attached photos of the gravel lot and the clubhouse steps. I attached the tow receipt, the damaged photo, everything. I didn't write it like a sob story. I wrote it like a timeline. Because bullies don't fear anger. They fear paper trails. Then I waited. And this is where the retaliation got stupid. 2 nights later, at 2:58 a.m., I woke up to that same scraping sound. Metal on concrete. I rolled to the window and saw a bright yellow boot clamped on my front wheel. Not a toe this time, just enough to trap me without dragging the van away. I stared at it and felt something snap, because a boot doesn't just immobilize a car. It immobilizes my life. Work, meds, emergencies, everything. I rolled outside, cold air hitting my face, and at the end of the driveway, under the streetlight, Denise stood there in a robe like she was watching a reality show. Next to her was a security contractor holding a flashlight. Denise said, "Good, you're up. Maybe now you'll understand." I said, "Understand what?" She said, "That this is a community. We have standards." I nodded. "So you decided to trap my mobility vehicle at 3 in the morning." She snapped, "It's not a mobility vehicle, it's a big, ugly van." And then she said the line that told me everything I needed to know. "You people always want exceptions. You people." I looked past her at the contractor. "Who authorized the boot?" He shrugged. "We got a work order." I looked back at Denise and said, quietly, "You keep saying standards like it's armor, but you've been putting everything in writing. Notes, emails, now this. You're building my case for me." Denise's face tightened. "Are you threatening me?" I smiled, not friendly. "No, I'm informing you." Then I did something I will never regret. I pulled out my phone and took one single photo. The boot in the foreground, my driveway, and Denise standing under the streetlight in the background, robe and all, staring like she owned the scene. That photo became Exhibit A in my mind before I even got back inside. The next morning, I got a message that changed the whole temperature of the neighborhood. It was from someone I barely knew, a board member named Lisa, and it was short, like she was afraid of being seen. "Nate, I'm sorry." Denise went rogue. I told her to stop. "Please keep everything. I'll confirm if needed." That was the twist. Because it meant the board wasn't united, and Denise wasn't just enforcing rules, she was enjoying the power. That same afternoon, the fair housing investigator called me. Calm voice. Professional. "Did you request accommodation?" "Yes." "Did they deny in writing?" "Yes." "Did they take actions after your request?" "Yes." "Do you have evidence?" I said, "I have photos, emails, receipts, measurements, and a boot currently on my front wheel." There was a pause on the line, then a simple, "Okay, we're going to move quickly." 2 days later, the HOA's attorney emailed me. Not Denise. Not the board. A lawyer. Suddenly the tone was polite, like they discovered manners overnight. They wanted to discuss a resolution. We met over Zoom. On their side, the attorney, Denise, the property manager, and 2 other board members, one of them Lisa, who looked like she'd aged 5 years in a week. On my side, me, Mark, and my folder of evidence. The attorney started with, "Mr. Harper, the association regrets any inconvenience." I cut in calm. It wasn't inconvenience. It was deprivation. Denise rolled her eyes and muttered, "Here we go." Her attorney shot her a look so sharp, she actually shut up. And then the silence hit. Not normal silence. That conference call silence where you can hear someone swallow, where you can hear someone shift in their chair, where you can feel everyone realizing the same thing at the same time. This isn't a Facebook argument anymore. This is liability. I laid it out. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for equal access. My van stays in my driveway. No fines. No boot. No towing. They reimburse my tow fees, reimburse the boot fee, repair the damage, pay Mark's consulting fee, and they commit to fixing the obvious accessibility issues they've ignored, starting with paving a section of the guest lot and installing a compliant ramp at the clubhouse entrance, because they rent it out and they can't keep pretending steps are acceptable. The property manager swallowed and said, "That could be expensive." I said, "So is discrimination." Denise snapped. "Why should everyone pay because you want to park wherever you want?" Lisa leaned forward and said, quietly but clearly, "Denise, it's not wherever he wants. It's his driveway." Denise opened her mouth, then closed it, because for the first time in this whole mess, someone on her own team said no. The attorney cleared his throat, looked straight into the camera, and said, "Denise, we are not litigating this." The way he said it, it wasn't advice. It was a seatbelt locking. You could practically hear her ego crack. The settlement wasn't movie money, and honestly, I didn't want movie money. I wanted control of my life back. The agreement reimbursed the tow and boot fees, covered repairs, and covered Mark's assessment. The HOA granted a permanent written accommodation for my mobility van in my driveway, and they agreed to a timeline to pave accessible parking and build a compliant ramp at the clubhouse, plus fair housing training for board leadership. And the boot came off that day, not within a week, not after the board votes, not when we have time, that day. 2 months later, Cedar Hollow looked different. Not dramatically, just enough to matter. Gravel replaced with smooth pavement in a section. 2 accessible spaces with proper signage. Curb cuts appeared at corners like they'd been hiding all along. The clubhouse got a ramp. The same neighbors who used to whisper about my ugly van started waving like we'd been friends forever. And my van sat in my driveway every night, right where it belonged. But here's the part that's going to make people argue, because it didn't end with a group hug and a life lesson montage. A week after the ramp went in, the HOA sent out an email announcing a small dues increase to cover community infrastructure upgrades. And within hours, the neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Why are our fees going up? This is what happens when one person complains. Accessibility is important, but not at the expense of property values. Someone posted a photo of my van with the caption, "This is why." I stared at that post for a long time, and I realized something. People love fairness in theory. They love inclusion when it's free. The moment it costs them money, space, or ego, they start calling equal access a special favor. So I want to end with a question, and I actually want you to answer it in the comments, because I've watched this debate split neighborhoods and families in half. If you lived in Cedar Hollow and the HOA said, "We're raising dues a little to make the clubhouse and parking accessible," would you support it, or would you fight it? And if you'd fight it, would you say that to my face, knowing that ramp might be the difference between me living a normal life and me being trapped at home? At what dollar amount does inclusion stop being worth it to you? And here's the uncomfortable one. If the only reason you support accessibility is because you might need it someday, is that community, or is that just self-interest with nicer packaging? Tell me where you land. Tell me if you've dealt with an HOA like this, or watched someone get singled out because they didn't match the aesthetic. And if you think Denise was just enforcing rules, say that too. I want the arguments, I want the perspectives, I want the uncomfortable honesty. If you want more real lifestyle stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who still thinks rules are always neutral. Because sometimes rules are just a costume people wear when they want to bully without getting their hands dirty.